Welcome, Deanna, back to the podcast. This is actually your second time on the podcast. The first time we were going kind of over like about you and this amazing adventure that you're preparing for. And now, months later, we are on here to talk about your Florida FKT, which you are the overall fastest person to do this, which is amazing. And before we get into like all the nitty gritty, how are you feeling after the whole event? And what feelings and emotions did you go through towards that end of actually doing the amazing feat that you did?
I feel really good right now. Like physically, it's funny. I really wasn't even that sore the next day after finishing. And I think a lot of that's because my body really just adapted by the end of it. Just this is what we're doing every day. We are just running and walking, 55 plus miles every day. And I'm really lucky. I feel blessed. I didn't, I finished with no injuries
Awesome.
and overall, physically, I feel fully recovered. It's been about 2 weeks now since I finished, but I still have not gone on a run yet. I've done some light jogging and that's in some of my hikes, but mostly just walking and doing some cross training and starting to go back to the gym and try to rebuild strength. So physically, everything's been great. I'll be honest, mentally, it's been pretty challenging just transitioning from this just day to day lifestyle where you have this very simple goal every day, and it is just all you do all day is I'm just walking and running in the woods, eating, sleeping, to just immediately jumping back into just normal life, which to me, I feel very overstimulated and overwhelmed with just everything going on. I've also felt this weird, just kind of feeling of just being lost. Like
Mm.
I've been obsessed with this huge goal that I've had for the last year of my life, and now it's all over with. And it's like, it's kind of that feeling I feel like a lot of ultra runners experience where it's like, wow, what next? What's next? And I didn't plan a what's next because
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going to happen after finishing. I didn't know if I would, be hurt or be burnt out or just be just totally done with this running stuff. And I think it definitely, to me, it just really reiterated that I love this sport
Mm.
so much, and I'm not I'm not done and I'm not burnt out, but I think just all of the rest and just kind of nothingness that I've been doing the last couple weeks has put me into a little bit of a rut in a weird way.
Mm.
I feel like a lot of ultra runners kind of feel this like post race depression a little bit. Just again, I've been obsessed with this one thing all year. It became my identity, and now it's I'm not working towards anything major right now, so I feel a little bit I felt a little bit down, but I think for me finding a new routine is where
Mm.
I'm like starting to get out of that.
Oh, that
Because
makes
I had this one routine, for like 19, 20 days, and that's all I did, and then immediately it's like that's gone. I have no routine. I'm like sleeping in. It's like, well, why do I need to get up? And yeah.
No, that makes so much sense. And I know like I was out there for it. So like I got to literally experience your day-to-day interaction of like what time you woke up, what time you took a nap, everything, which was so cool. And I can only imagine what it's like getting out of that because I remember after my 200 I felt that way. And I was only out there for a couple days compared to your adventure, which I believe your official time's 19 days, 13 hours, no, 12 hours, 13 minutes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So again, 19 days, 12 hours, 13 minutes. Incredible. And it's so hard. Like you said, you spent so much time preparing for this, training for this, not only physically, mentally, and then being there and going through this FKT. I can only imagine like every day you woke up, you had one thing to do, and that was, to get out there and work your butt off and then go to sleep, wake up and do it again. And once that was done, I can only imagine that like post depression. And then you had mentioned before, and I kind of before we got on here, like you had to hop in back into your personal life, like race directing and getting back into the groove of all of that. So I can only imagine too, like I'm sure you didn't really have much time to process everything and really accept and understand like holy crap, you just did this amazing accomplishment.
You're right. Yeah, I didn't have much time to really decompress after finishing, and for me really being alone, and it's kind of weird because obviously, out there, I was alone a lot. There were a lot of days that I didn't have a pacer and it was just me and Scott out there all day. And I had a lot of time to myself and my own thoughts. And some days were, I was down and some days I was up and they were better than others. But going from like this like bubble we were in the
Mm.
whole time, and it was a small bubble, it was either just me or Scott or all the people that would come out. So that was like you for a few days. But at most it would only be like two or three people, right? For a day. And this was our bubble for almost 3 weeks, right? And so to go from that to, I finished, we came back together, Scott was with me for another like 3 days after finishing, helping me unload the car, clean everything out, get, just try to get everything sorted. I was never really like alone in that time to really process myself. And then after he left, I immediately had to leave town to go direct a race.
Yeah.
Um, and then immediately get back to just emails, putting this race on, and then jumping into the race where I was around like 100 or more people, which I will say that was really nice. I think because that week it was starting to settle in, like just kind of feeling that feeling of just
Mm.
being down on, I have nothing, I finished my big thing and I don't have a routine yet. I'm not like exercising like regularly, which feels good, right? um so it was nice to be around a bunch of people after that, especially because it's like my people, right? It's like
Mhm.
this community, so many people that I know and love and run with and do races with. So that was really nice, but I never really got like decompression time or time to really reflect by myself.
Yeah, and that's it's sadly it's life. Like we're
Yeah.
always pretty busy and it's what we got to do. And I think it's amazing how not only when I was there, but like even now the little bit we've talked, like you're so with it and I know you mentioned like mentally struggling, but I feel like you're clear-headed and like on track and I've been seeing and reading the posts that you post like it's amazing and everything you've been doing. It's so cool and I have tons of questions, but at the same time, like I would really love for you to kind of start out like honestly, like day one kind of, and you don't have to go detail to
Mhm.
detail. But just like that first day, like what was that feeling for you? Because you had literally planned, like you said, for a year to accomplish this major goal, and you were literally starting it. And so, what was that first day like for you?
So day one was everything I sort of expected because I'd actually already done pretty much I did 48 miles on day 1,
Mhm.
which that was the only day that I went below 50 miles, and it was planned that way because the first 30 miles of the entire Florida Trail is going through this section called Big Cypress National Preserve. And it's 30 miles where there's no crew access at all. It's very remote, very challenging, I mean, it's like it sounds. It's completely in the swamp,
Mhm.
and we got lucky with really good trail conditions. It was pretty dry for just, I mean, and that's why I chose this time of year. The trail conditions are drier typically, but the last 10 miles are still completely underwater because it was more dry. A lot of the wet spots were just mud, and
Mm.
that made it challenging. Um, but anyways, I had already done all of the trail that I had done, on that day one. Out of the 48 miles, I had done, I think, about 38 of those miles. And then the last 10 miles were a road walk. And I drove that a few months before doing the trail because I was out, scouting out the trail. And so it was everything I expected, having done the trail before. Um, we woke up, the only difference was we woke up really early because we knew it was going to be really hot. Pretty much the first 9 days of being on the trail were in the mid to high 80s every single day.
Mhm.
And there was only one cloudy day mixed in there. And so we decided to pretty much start off the day. We woke up at 2:30 on day one. We got on the trail by 3:10 was my official start time.
Okay.
And so I mean, yeah, so it's like, I think those first 3.5 hours were totally in the dark going through Big Cypress. It was really foggy,
Mhm.
which was kind of difficult. It's difficult to see if you're ever in the dark with the fog with your headlamps. It just completely just clouds in front of you. So all you see is just like this dense fog in front of you on the trail. But once the sun came up, it started to burn off the fog and just opened everything up, and it started to get warm. But one thing I didn't think about was, we got out of Big Cypress at I think 11:30 a.m. Like it was almost noon, and it was definitely hot at that point. But because we had been like walking through swamp water the last, few hours, I didn't really take into account how much that cools off your whole body when your feet are
Mm.
wet.
Mhm.
And so after we finally got out of Big Cypress, it was the first crew stop of the day, mile 31. I was there for like 15, 20 minutes, dried my feet out, got on new dry shoes and socks, and I took off for an 8 mile section before I saw them again. And oh my God, it was so hot. I was like, wow, I didn't feel this hot. And it
Mhm.
was because our feet were wet. And so after I got off that 8 mile section, the rest of the day, like those last 10 miles, were all road walk through the Seminole Reservation. And so my crew was actually able to just drive up next to me and
Mhm.
just help me out. They went and set up camp. So yeah, I feel like, day one, we took it really easy, just, going out at a pretty moderate pace, knowing obviously there's still a lot of miles left of the Florida Trail. It's silly to go out too fast for
Mhm.
something this big, and knowing how much, knowing the distance that's ahead, but also just knowing how many more challenging sections are ahead. So yeah, we took it easy, just stuck to the plan.
Mhm.
Well, actually, I take that back. We didn't stick to the plan. The plan was only 44 miles, but because we made such good time in Big Cypress because of the conditions, we made this executive decision to just go the extra 4 miles. I finished at our campsite, which right off the trail, it's in the Seminole Reservation. There's a church. It's called the Big Cypress New Testament Baptist Church. The pastor there lets Florida Trail hikers camp on the property. He even has showers built in on the property,
So
and you're allowed to use this entire like kitchen space. So it was really nice. I literally finished, I walked up to where we were sleeping that night.
that's so cool, and what a good way to
Oh.
end the first night. Because I know, like, in where we
Mhm.
when we were out there and in future references, you didn't always have the nicest way of sleeping. You either had to travel somewhere or, like, right on the side of the road or within some, not to say weird, but, like, not ideal place. So it's super cool that you had that ability there at the church to do that, and even though you went a little further than planned, definitely worth it for sure, I'm sure, for that first day.
And it was worth it because it positively dominoed into the rest of the FKT. And I will say, because I went just 4 miles further on day one, it put me like 6 miles ahead, or no, 8 miles ahead on day two, 8 miles ahead overall on day two. And then by day three, I was like 10 or 13 miles ahead overall of my original plan. And then by day four, you were there.
Yep.
We were 20 miles ahead
Yeah.
overall because of that big stretch section, which is kind of a crux point in the
Yeah,
overall Florida Trail. And
for
so
sure.
it played out really well. I honestly, looking back on all of it, the first 5 days that I was on the Florida Trail, I wouldn't change anything that we did. Like
Fair.
just as far as the mileage every day, like I think we played it out almost perfectly those first 5 days.
That's awesome, and I remember when I got there and I was, chatting with Scott. I met Scott when I went to the first aid stop that I was there for, and he's like, "Yeah, we're like 19 miles ahead." I'm like, "No way." He's like, "Yeah, she's just doing good." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is insane." But it's incredible. And, it just goes to show like how good of an athlete you are, how good of a runner you are. And, I'm so impressed. I remember the first thing I said to my partner when I was out there, like, I came out there and was crewing you and I saw you and she's like, "How's it going?" And instantly I was like, "Dude, she looks so good. Like so mentally with it. You were so strong." And then I ran with you, and right after that as well, I was like, I cannot believe, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but you expect some down or some hurt within the attitude or
Mhm.
anything, and we were the first section I did with you is that fourth night, fifth night,
It
and
was day four, yeah.
yeah. And we did 20 miles together. And the whole time, like you chatted my ear off. And I was like, listen, if you ever need a moment to yourself, like just speak. And we talked the whole time. It was great. And I just remember thinking, like, I am so impressed. We're on day 4. You're still cruising. I was truly so impressed. And I think I told you that, but I just have to say again, like I was so impressed. All the time I was there, I was impressed. But mentally, I was so surprised by how mentally good you were. But I was also like, dude, she's got this. This is going to be an amazing adventure.
Thank you. That was at the very end of the day too, which is
Yeah.
crazy. Because that was I felt the worst like in the really early morning hours, like the first 3 hours of the day. And then towards the end of the day, I definitely started, slowing down or feeling worse. But I will say I was also impressed with myself, just how mentally with it I was the whole time. I always knew what day it was, like what day of the week it was, the date, what day we were on the FKT,
Wow.
the mileage we were kind of at, because I was looking at my phone a bit, just at Far Out app, to
Mhm.
know like what mile marker we're at, where we're probably going to finish for the day. Some days I felt like I was more like mentally aware than Scott was, because
Mm.
Scott was more sleep deprived than I was, because at the end of the day he would get everything ready for me to go to bed,
Mhm.
I would go to bed, and he would be awake for another hour, 2 hours, getting my stuff ready for the next morning.
Mhm.
And then he would have to wake up a little earlier than me too to get my stuff ready and get me on the trail, you know?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so that was crazy. But he also was feeding me. I feel like my nutrition was pretty on point. But one of the things we started including were like adaptogenic mushrooms, like lion's mane,
Mm.
reishi, chaga mushrooms, like in some of my protein powder blends, and some of these special drink mixes he was making for me
Yeah.
had lion's mane in it, which is really good for, brain health and mental clarity and focus. And I think that helped me a lot, just preventing like brain fog. I never felt like I had brain fog on the trail.
That's incredible. That was one of the questions I have is like, how bad was it mentally for you? And to know that, like, I mean, I'm sure you had your moments, but at the end of the day, overall, it sounds like you were on point, and it's so incredible to know that you knew the dates too. Because I remember when we were out there talking, you're like, I'm a little worried that I'll forget or not know the date. And I'm like, yeah, there's no way I'd be able to remember all of this. And you're like, yeah. And I was like, but you're doing good right now, so it's fine. And it's a testament to know like you did all of this and we're still mentally there. I remember some of your posts too. We had talked while we were out there together, like you're like, I'm a little worried about posting, like, what it will look like. I don't think I will down the road, but I'm pretty sure up until you finish, you posted almost every day, correct?
I
Yeah.
did. And we were posting a day behind as well, because for safety reasons we didn't want anyone to know my exact location, where we were on the trail. So every time I was posting, it was actually from the day before. And so I had to also remember, what did I do yesterday at this time of the day, to post it to my
Mhm.
story or whatnot. And so I had to also keep track of just like the yesterday stuff, to just post little updates here and there on my stories at least. And yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, no, that's I remember you were telling me that and I was like, there's no, like, not in a mean way, there's no way this is gonna keep up. And from what I could tell, it did. And I was like, dang, I'm so impressed. And only because of like the mental aspect of it, not because of any other reason of like you literally were averaging, I think your average was 57 miles a day.
That's, yeah, about, yeah.
Yeah, that's so impressive. So, you know, aside from the simple fact of running, run, walk, however, you ran 50, it doesn't matter. You did this. It's amazing. What would you say would be the hardest aspect of this whole FKT?
I mean, the hardest aspect is you're exhausted, right? You're sleep deprived, your body, you're at your limit, right? Um, but it all comes down to just mentally pushing yourself, right? And I think the hardest part is, it's loneliness, it's the fatigue, it's the physical part is honestly not even the hardest part. I mean, it is, because there were a lot of days where I was just like, I can't run right now.
Mm,
And when you can't run, walk, right? That's why I trained so much doing power walking and just learning to walk fast, and power hike, because you are using those muscles every single day. um, but I would say the hardest part is just battling the loneliness, the fatigue. And for me, I think my biggest struggle was just eating food and
mm,
finding, and that's something I kind of, so I kind of went into it thinking and knowing, it's going to get hard to eat at some point, which is why I pre-made a ton of soups to have. And we lived off those for like 10, 11 days. They were great. Um, but I just wasn't expecting to just be disgusted with almost everything. Like
mhm,
almost everything I ate at some point was just disgusting to me. Nothing tasted good anymore. And yeah, the eating part was really hard. But at the same time, I mean, as much as I didn't want to eat and I didn't enjoy it, I still forced food down. And because of that, I was able to maintain weight. I didn't lose any weight.
oh,
There were times I'm pretty sure I was like definitely overeating. Um, and I only say that, I mean, I guess I'm getting sidetracked here. Um, but you know, there were a lot of things Scott was making my food and not really telling me what he was putting in my food, because he would make these smoothies for me. You probably saw him
Oh
making
yeah.
some of the smoothies, the protein smoothies and the NutriBullet, but he was throwing like all kinds of weird stuff in there, like not weird stuff, but just high calorie stuff like avocado, coconut, um, you know, chia seeds, hemp seeds. And once we got more into it, he saw there were certain snack foods I was not eating. So he would just throw those in the blender. Like he was throwing a Lara bar in the blender. He started throwing cookies in the blender just
Oh,
because there were calories. And and on top of that, he also started feeding me unflavored tailwind in all of my water, which I didn't notice because he was also putting apple juice in the water. And I knew there was apple juice in the water just to add a little bit more sugar, but I didn't know there was tailwind. And I wish I had known, because had I known, I was like, well, now it makes sense why I felt like I was so full all the time, because I was drinking that and I
mm.
was also eating every 15 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, that was a total sidetrack, but
No, 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 and that's so impressive. I remember, like, being out there with you, literally every 15 minutes we were eating and consuming water or Tailwind, so, I do understand that, and, I was there for some of Scott's, concoction or mixes of whatever he was doing, and sometimes I'm like, "That is not gonna taste good," but you drank it or ate it every time. I was like, "I am so impressed." But to go back a little bit, so you'd mentioned, like, you trained in the sense of, like, power walking, power hiking. I have to tell you, when I was there, Sean and I were talking, and he randomly goes, "Dude, I can't even keep up with her. Her power walks are like a run for me." And I was like, "Thankfully, like I have long legs, so I could keep up with her." But you were moving, and I just remember thinking, like, "Oh, there's no way." Like like because the 20 miles that we did that day one I was there, I think we held just about a 15-minute pace for the whole 20 miles, and I remember some of the portions that we were walking, I was like having to like hobble a little more because I'm like trying to keep up with your walk. So I was super impressed. And, it just goes to show it all paid off because, we were 5 days in, 4 days in. And eventually, you continue to do that throughout the whole training or the whole FKT, which is incredible. And I can only imagine the fatigue and wanting to eat because I remember seeing some videos that, your whole crew, like Scott was posting or other people I saw, and sometimes and you could tell you were done eating. But every time I saw you, you were, I hate to say it's like either choking it down or you were just getting it in and continuing to eat. So that's incredible. While you were out there, did you have something that was like your favorite thing to eat?
I don't I don't know. It's funny because so many things that I eat normally, just like in my daily life, and things that I ate during my training that I normally love, I did not like at
Mm.
all on the trail, and I would not touch it. And like, example, I love peanut butter, I love nut butters. I eat it. I eat peanut butter all the time. I eat like a whole like container, like a week practically. And I ate a ton of peanut butter during my training. I make these like peanut butter protein balls out of oat flour and a little maple syrup, and I add chocolate chips, and I eat those in my training. But I think I only had one peanut butter jelly, like, the entire time, because I think for me it was so hot, and the texture, it was so thick and sticky, and I just did not wanna eat it. And I also got picky, and this was by day 2 or 3. I didn't want anything that was really dry, like,
Mm.
chips, crackers, cookies, like those, oat balls that I make. I didn't want any of it. I only wanted, like, really like cold fresh fruit, like watermelon was amazing, hydrating things. The smoothies were great, the protein shakes were great because I was able to drink them. By the end, I mean, he was making those smoothies about 1,000 calories each. And
Wow.
at first I was able to drink all of them, but by the end I would be like, I can only drink half of it, and I'd say, look, I'll drink the other half when I see you next. Because if I drink all of this, like, it would mess me up. I would drink all of it and get on the trail, and I just feel so bloated and full, like I could throw up for the first hour.
Mm.
And I'd have to like just power hike for an hour just to let it sit, you know? Um, but yeah, you asked me, what was it, foods that I loved or did not
Love.
love?
Yes, love, love.
Loved. Okay, so watermelon, just like cold watermelon. It was so hot. That was amazing. Coconut water was great. I've always loved cold coconut water because it was hot for a lot of this
Yeah.
FKT. That was great. And honestly, I made a lot of soups, but the one thing that I loved the most was my butternut squash soup.
Okay.
It was so good. There was one night he cooked noodles with it, so I had like noodles and soup. That was great. And then honestly, there were a couple nights we were near a city or town that had restaurants, and we got Thai food. And I love Thai
Yeah.
food, really just like fried rice or a pad Thai or drunken noodles.
Mhm.
So we had that, and I loved that. And then honestly, at the very end, when I got closer to Pensacola, I have a huge group of friends in just trail running community over there. We had so much help from people, but my good friend Alan, who is also a vegan, made this like red lentil curry soup. And I told him, I was like, don't make it. I'm not going to be able to handle it spicy.
Oh,
And he was like, are you sure? He's like, this is like the most bland soup I've ever made. But that to me, that was the best soup I ever had. It was so good. And I think just because it was savory, it had like coconut, full fat, like coconut milk in there. And that was really good. But that was only like for like 2 nights I lived off that soup.
mhm. Very
Um,
cool, very cool.
yeah, but everything else, I mean, I ate a ton of potatoes.
Mhm.
The coconut rice was also really good. I loved that. So I would just eat rice in a bag. Scott was making me avocado sandwiches. Those were great. But by the end, I didn't really like any of it.
Yeah.
I was just eating it. I was just eating it. I would have to wash everything down with water
Mm.
or applesauce.
Oh,
And the applesauce pouches, I was like, just wash it down with that because it was really hydrating. And those also had a little bit of calories too.
yeah, for sure. But
Um,
that's good.
Yeah. Oh, and now that I think of it, I thought of a couple more things. The Noka smoothie pouches.
Mm.
Those, I've met a lot of people who've never heard of them before. They sell them. I found them at Costco, but they also actually have them at Walmart apparently. And they're smoothie pouches that are 120 calories each. So it's got more calories than like a baby food pouch or an applesauce pouch. Um, and those were amazing. They have 5 grams of protein in each of them. I was obsessed with those on the trail. Those and then the date fix pouches, which
Mm.
were only 80 calories each, but those were always really good to get down. So I had a ton of those. So I ate a lot of those too. So
Yeah.
yeah, fruit pouches, baby food. Yeah, that was what I lived off of a lot of the time.
Yeah, I remember the date fixes. Is it date fixes?
Date fix, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember those. You would down them like no problem. Like I knew if we were struggling to eat, I was like, "Here, just try one of these." You'd kind of give me like, I'm like, "No, you'll get it down," and you did, no problem. And then so I have to tell you, I've never heard of the Noka pouches until I met you, and we were out there, and I have suggested it to so many runners now. It is unreal, just because it looked good. It was tons of calories in it, tons of all the
Mhm.
goodness, and you had no problem getting them down too. So I'm like, they have to be decent. I have yet to try them though. I do plan to incorporate them into my training because it's just easy to carry, easy to get down. And I had one on my 200. Lizzie brought it for me, and she's like, "Here, just try this." I was like, "I don't know what this is, but it's really good." And it was just some random flavor, but it's super nice to know that like you had such a variety out there, and some things worked, and then they didn't, and then you went back. I know when we first started or I first started with you, you weren't into potatoes. But when I ended, which just a few days later, you were eating potatoes like it was nobody's business. So I was like, oh, well, there's one thing that came and go. So, and I'm sure it happened so much throughout. But since we're kind of talking about food, I'm sure you planned a whole bunch. You'd mentioned there's tons of planning that went into this, but what was kind of your setup? Or maybe we'll go through like your setup when you first woke up, what time you woke up, what time you wanted to try starting to get out on the trail, and then like what your nutrition looked like throughout the day.
So first thing in the morning, and this is funny because my original plan, I had like this whole routine. I was like, this is gonna be my breakfast every morning on the trail. And this is my normal pre-race like breakfast. Like if I like any race, whether it's a 50K, 50 miler, 100 miler, I always have the same breakfast in the morning before my race. And I usually always do oatmeal and a banana and maybe in a protein shake, maybe. And so the plan for this was I packed a ton of oats. I was like, we're gonna do, and it's easy. All you do is boil some water, and I can do the quick oats and add some coconut sugar, some cinnamon, hemp seeds, chia seeds, just add extra stuff to bulk it up with calories and nutrition. The plan was to do oatmeal, like a little, like, not like an insane amount, but like I always, again, make it soupy so I
Mhm.
could drink it. Just make drinkable oatmeal, have a banana, and have like a protein shake, and that be my breakfast. And I know it's a lot, and that's also why it ended up not being the breakfast. Literally day two, I was like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want that at all. So what ended up being my breakfast every day was a protein shake, and not just any protein shake. I do the Kachava protein shakes, which is really a meal shake. So it's about 300 calories for the whole shake. So I was having that and a banana every morning for breakfast. With my morning, I did my daily vitamin routine. I have like a multivitamin. I take a vegan omega-3 vitamin. I take a curcumin, like turmeric supplement as well every day. And that with water, that was my breakfast every morning. And then, and it's not like, and it's not an insane amount, but it was so hard to get that down in the mornings because, especially waking up so freaking early at 3 a.m., I had no appetite. I
Mhm.
had no appetite, and I think you started to see it like one of the mornings before you left, that I was gagging to just try and just eat a banana and get food down because I did not want to eat. And but I would force it down every morning, and then, I'd let it settle for like 30 or so minutes on the trail once I got moving. And then once I was on the trail, after that, I started making myself take in more. And usually those first 3 hours were only things like the Noka pouches, Date
Mhm.
Fix, baby food, applesauce, or we finally started getting those spring wolf packs, which is like an oatmeal pouch
Mhm.
basically, but they're not huge. It's not like, it's just like, kind of like a little bit bigger than, those baby food pouches. I was able to get those down as well as part of like my first, the first 3 hours of the day, my breakfast.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so that's what I did. And once, it's funny, every single day, like clockwork, like once my watch hit 2.5 to 3 hours, like starting into my run, it's like all that nausea and weird stomach stuff and like taste bud stuff, it all lifted. Like after 2.5 to 3 hours every day, I suddenly was like, okay, I can start eating like, like Cliff Bars, or I didn't eat Cliff Bars at all. But like, like packaged stuff, like more solid food.
Mhm. No, that makes sense, and it's crazy that it was so I'm sure it was just your body getting in a rhythm, like, eventually it was just like, "Hey, she's gonna fill me up, and I'm gonna be miserable for a little while, and then it'll settle down, and you'll pretty much, like, probably burn, not to say all of it, but a decent amount that your body's like, "Okay, now we know what we're doing, we need to keep doing it," which is insane, and you had mentioned before, like, you were so used to it in the sense of, like, you woke up, you ate, you kind of went, it would then go back to sleep and do it all over again, and I know you'd mentioned on social media, like, when you got done, you were kinda still in that groove of, like, waking up, almost thinking like you needed to continue to, get up and start running. Was that true?
Yes, the first, thankfully, it only lasts like 4 or 5 nights,
Okay.
but for the first 4 or 5 nights after finishing the Florida Trail, I was having these almost nightmares of, I'd wake up in like a panic and I thought I was still on the trail, and I kept feeling like I needed to be running or walking and I wasn't going to make it. And I think part of that is because every day, it's like you're on this like deadline every day. And even though, it's, you have a simple objective every day, I think it's myself too, I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform, right? I
Mhm.
think we all do. But I think doing this for like, almost 20 whole days, just this immense pressure every day to meet this deadline, get this mileage, finish here and finish the day. It was like my subconscious had not turned off yet, and it did not realize that we were no longer on the Florida Trail. Because yeah, those first 4 or 5 nights, I kept having that dream that it was dark, and it was dark out, and I needed to be running and walking, and I wasn't going to make it. And I kept thinking I'm on the Florida Trail, and I'd wake up and be like, oh my God, Deanna, you're not, you finished. Like, you finished the Florida Trail. It's over. You made it. And it was scary. But thankfully, that only lasted those few nights, and that went away.
Yeah, and I can imagine what a panic it was to, like, wake up and be like, "Oh, I'm safe," not saying you thought you were, like,
Yeah.
in danger, but your nervous system is still probably, trying to figure out what's going on because you had literally done so much in 20 days and nonstop consistent day after day after day. And it's crazy what the body can do in the mind. Like you'd mentioned multiple times, like physically you just kept going, yes, like, but it was your mind where like you didn't want to run, so you had to walk. And
Mhm.
it's the mind that you know does tricky things to us, which proves that even once you were done and you knew you'd done everything you did, you literally crushed the FKT, and at the same time, like you went to bed, had bad dreams, and like woke up panicking that you weren't done, even though like you literally did.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
uh
But to be done and everything, it's an amazing thing, and I'm glad things are kind of back to normal. But getting back into the actual trail, so your mornings, you mentioned you wake up at 3 o'clock, and then you
Mhm.
try to be out running by 3:30, correct?
Between 3:30 and 4, and it really depended where we slept the night before. There were probably 5 or 6 nights that we got to sleep, like, right off the trail, and so
Mm.
I could wake up and literally just walk off from our campsite and start, and those were amazing mornings because I got to start a little earlier. Like, some mornings I did start at, like, 3:30, 3:35, but there were a lot more days where we did have to drive 10 to 20, 30 minutes at most to, another campsite where we could legally camp. We did get a hotel or a motel for a couple of the nights, and so we would have to wake up and commute some mornings, but I never started later. I think the latest I had started was 3:55. So
Wow.
I never started later than 4 a.m. on the trail, which was nice.
Yeah, that's
So,
incredible. Yeah,
yeah,
that is
really
wild.
early.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, roughly 3:30, 4 a.m. start. And then obviously your aid stops, however you want to call it, were all different because it's a Florida trail. You go to point to point. But when would you say you would try to, like, would you try to nap? How'd that look? And,
Mhm.
like, I know obviously not every day was the same, but ideally, roughly when was that for you?
So pretty much every day, it really depended because for me, I was looking at my watch constantly, and I would also be looking ahead at whatever crew stops there were, and I do the math in my head of like what my watch would say mileage wise would be. But it also was based off of time of day, so really somewhere around like 1 o'clock, yeah, like 1 or 2 o'clock was when we would take, like, we call it my nap break for the day.
Mhm.
And it would be about an hour long total break. And in that 1 hour, I would take my shoes off, take my socks off, even if they weren't wet, fully let my feet just air out, dry out a little bit. And I'd take 20 minutes to try and like take a nap. Some days I didn't really fall asleep. I would just kind of lay there with my eyes closed, which was still a nice rest and relaxation. Um, but I would and then, before after I would eat like a pretty big meal and then let it settle for that hour. And then I'd wake up and, get my shoes and stuff ready and hit the trail again. Um, but towards the end I tried, like, it would be around like 30 or so miles into the day, but towards the end I would really try to push it to like 35. Or one day we did at mile 42, I did my long break because I was making really good time that day. That way for me, I'm over halfway through the day.
Mhm.
That way it's like I took my longer break and I know I'm already over halfway through. So I only at that point had, maybe 20 miles left, maybe 25, maybe less than that. So that was always a nice feeling to know, get like this long break to really kind of rest up, take a nap, and then know that I'm already over halfway through the day and the rest of the day is just kind of, a breeze.
Heck yeah. No, it's so smart to do that. I know when I first jumped in, that was like Scott's like, we're trying to get a little over halfway when she takes a nap. I'm like, awesome.
Mhm.
And like you mentioned, not every day, I'm sure you did take a nap, but resting your eyes does wonders. Um,
Mhm.
Now before I go kind of asking some questions, I do have a random question. Did you hallucinate at all?
I did not.
No, very
I've had a couple people ask me that question, and I've never hallucinated in general
okay.
during a race ever. That's just not something I've ever done. I did not hallucinate at all during this. I feel like I was never truly like to the point of sleep deprivation
Mm.
because I was like this to me was a really long stage race, right?
Oh,
I
okay.
was I was
Mhm,
still sleeping every night.
mhm.
I still slept a good 6 hours every night, which is
Mm.
pretty solid. Some nights I did get closer to 7 hours of
Oh,
sleep,
wow.
which was really good. So I never felt like I was truly to that point of being so just sleep deprived that I would hallucinate.
Yeah.
So,
And
except the last night, the last 2 days, we decided to just do the last 114 miles all in one go, which was not fun. I don't like, I did not like that. I did not like that 114 miles because I really just doing the overnight was so hard. I was so tired. I was like, I did 19 days of doing this and I would sleep every night. And I was like, I want to sleep. Where's
yeah.
my sleep? Um, but I never hallucinated. I did like almost fall asleep on the trail that
Oh.
night. I was like, I did a section. I had two pacers with me and I was like wobbling like this. Like I felt like I was about to just fall asleep on the trail. And I did take like a trail nap on that.
Mm.
That was the only time I took a trail nap because I was never really that tired throughout doing the Florida Trail other than the last, night basically.
Yeah, and that's incredible. I know that was gonna be my next question, if you took any trail naps, because you literally woke up at 3 again, yes, you got some sleep, but you were moving. And I remember aids or like crew stops, you didn't hang out. You know what I mean? Like you literally got what you needed and went, except for like, every maybe few that you would have to do like a reset if we had to do a shoe change, or like your nap section where you would take a little bit of a nap.
Mhm.
Like you were not stopping, you were not just dilly dallying around, you definitely were pushing and going as much as possible, which is hard, because I'm sure there was multiple times where you just wanted to take a sit and relax your legs, or just rest for a little bit. But I remember one of the times that you came in when I was out there and you're like, I gotta go. And we're like you can take a second. You're like, no, I don't need to. And I'm like, dang, like it's just you were so strong willed, And I was like, she just like is ready to go. So it was incredible to see that, and I'm sure it continued throughout, obviously, with the amazing effort that you did. And it's wild that you pushed at the last moment. So we'll kind of go to that. And I know we're probably all over the place, but there's just so much in this. It's amazing. So that last 114 miles, like what made you want to push? I think I know, but like when did that moment hit you when you're like, I'm literally almost done. I'm just going to go.
I knew we were so close. And I think part of it was just knowing it would cut like, 6 or more hours off of the total time. And at that point, I knew I was going to be under 20 days, right? Which was always kind of the goal, was to go under 20 days. So I knew we were going to go under 20 days, even if we broke it up into 2 days. But I knew if we just went for it all at once, a couple things. One, I would get to finish in the daylight, which would be a lot nicer. More people would be there, because the alternative would have been, had I gone and we slept one more night and I woke up and it would have been like a normal like 55 or 56 or something mile day. However, I would have finished at my normal time, which would have been like, 7 to 8 p.m., which by then would have been dark. And also, Gulf Islands National Seashore, in that area, Fort Pickens, where they have the northern terminus, there's a gate and it closes at sunset.
Oh,
And we did plan for this. So we actually booked a campsite reservation there. They have a campground. We booked the campsite purely to get the gate code.
mhm.
So we did have the gate code. So, like, Scott could have gotten in, and then anyone else who wanted to be there to see me finish would have gotten in. But it would have been a little like, oh, it's dark. And at that point, it's like, let's just leave and go to bed.
Mhm.
Whereas finishing, at like, early afternoon, it was like, woohoo, like, let's go, celebrate, even though we didn't go anywhere. We went, and I think I went and took a nap at a hotel room. But everyone else went out and got like oysters and stuff before and after. And it was just, it was nicer to finish like in the day, because also another thing was I got to go into Fort Pickens because the gift shop was open till 5 o'clock. I got to go into Fort Pickens and sign the hiker logbook for one last time. And so for me, I really wanted to sign the hiker logbook. I signed every single logbook except for the one in Apalachicola, because there wasn't a pen.
Oh
And
no.
I was upset there was not a pen in that book. But I signed everything else. I really treated this whole thing like I was just another through hiker, just doing it very unconventionally. So anyways, yeah, I got to sign the logbook at Fort Pickens, which I really like. Everyone left me alone for a minute. And I was like, hey guys, I think I should be alone. I really want to reflect and just write out. And I don't even remember. I think I should have taken a photo of the notebook of what I wrote. I literally was so tired. I don't remember, but I wrote a whole page of just thoughts and feelings and reflections on the trail. So
That's
that was a
incredible.
special moment. So maybe someone will read that. And it would only be another hiker, because you have to go and ask the lady there to sign the book. But still, maybe someone will see that and it inspire them, or maybe I'll go back one day and read it and appreciate that moment.
Yeah, for sure. And that's amazing. And I can only imagine completing this during the day, because, like you said, so many more people were there and you could literally see what you were going through. I know we were talking one time in the midst of going through a trail, and you're like, this area is so beautiful, I wish you could see it. And it was dark time, and I can only imagine so many portions of the actual trail were like that for you. So it's amazing to finish and be able to see literally everything you're doing and have everyone out there, which is amazing. And what an incredible push. You had mentioned the nighttime was the hardest. Did you have people with you there for that like final night that you were pushing through?
I did. Yeah.
That's
Going back to just having so many friends and trail runners and just community in that area, like Pensacola, and like Destin, that whole area, there's so many really great people that I know that wanted to support me there. Funny enough, that's where I had the most people out there
Oh,
supporting
wow.
me. But yeah, I had pacers almost all day and all night
That's awesome.
on during those last 114 miles until I got to the beach. Once I got to the beach, I had someone with me for 10 miles of the beach, and then after that, I was like, I'm gonna do the rest alone.
Mm.
And then just to kind of be on the beach and reflect in the moment, even though at that point I didn't really care anymore. I just wanted to finish because it was the middle of the day. It was really hot. The sun, because of the time of day, the sun was like I was walking into the sun, so it was in my face. And it was also kind of high tide. So I was just walking through really soft sand. And at that point, I was just like, I was done. And it sucks because this is probably one of the most beautiful beaches just in Florida. It's just Gulf Islands National Seashore is gorgeous. It's just turquoise blue water, it's white sand. It's incredible. But at that point I didn't appreciate it anymore.
Yeah.
I was like because the sand was so I could not run in that sand. I was
Mm.
power hiking like 17-minute miles and it was pretty miserable.
Oh, no.
That was hard. So
Yeah, that's crazy. And, so how many miles did you finish off by yourself?
I think the last like 14 or 15 I
Wow,
did by
that's incredible.
myself.
That's
Yeah. And
and
so
I'm sure it was an amazing experience to have it by yourself because I'm sure you were feeling all the feelings. So with that being said, during that last 14 miles, did you cry at all?
no. I don't think
No?
I did until I finished,
Okay.
but I'll tell you the moment I did cry was when I went over the bridge in Navarre, which so pretty much, when you cross the bridge, you go over this big bridge in Navarre. Once you get on the other side of the bridge, you're on the barrier island that is Gulf Islands National Seashore, and from there, you have a 50K left at that point.
Okay.
So once you go over this bridge, you just have 50K left. And for me, I cried on that bridge. That was a really emotional time for me because I knew this was the home stretch. That
Mm.
that to me was my home stretch. Was getting over that bridge and seeing just the island, seeing, you're on a bike path for the first few miles before you get on the beach and in the sand. But for me, just knowing like this is it, like you're on this bridge and you see, I mean, you're just surrounded by this beautiful, you know, island and the water. And I knew where I was at that point because I had been there before. I drove out in October last year to see, I drove that road section, and then I didn't get on the beach because I've been on the beach. It's just beach, but I did do some of the dunes section that you do, and I walked on some of the bike path. And just knowing where I was and knowing how much I had left, that was my most emotional moment. After that, the rest of it was just pushing till I finished, and then after that, I didn't cry until I finished.
Very cool, very cool. I have always have to
So
ask because like I'm so emotional, but also not emotional at the same time. It's
Mhm.
it comes and goes when it wants to. And I feel like at every like ending point, you choke up a little. Like you see that finish line or the
Mhm.
ending point, and you're like, I just did this amazing feat. And it's so cool to hear when people's moments are because everyone's a little different. Like you said, it was that
Mhm.
last moment where you're like, I literally am like right here. And yes, it's a 50K later, but it's a huge achievement. And I can only imagine what you're experiencing throughout the that last 50K, which is awesome. When you did finish, I know you had a bunch of people there. Were you like, I'm done, I don't want to be around people, or were you happy to be there and celebrating?
I was happy
Good.
because my mom surprised me and she was there. She printed out this huge banner that she had everyone like sign a little note on it. And it had like photos of me that I guess were taken. She took them from Facebook. They were posted like really in the beginning. And these photos from me from the beginning that she had like printed on this banner. Um, Laid out, and there were people there. It was really nice just to see everyone. Like Brandy and Bradley were there,
Yeah.
and they're some of my best friends. They were with me. They crewed me for the first 3 days, and then they also came and they crewed me for 2 other days, kind of in the middle. And they drove all the way from New Smyrna Beach to Pensacola, which is I think they drove like 8 or 9 hours just to see me finish. And so seeing them there made me really happy. And just a lot of the pacers I had had that night or the day before were there. My mom was there, and it was just this really special moment. Like I was, but it's weird though. It didn't really hit me
Mhm.
like because it's so weird. For like 19 days, all I'm thinking about is finishing, right? And that for me was like my visualization every day, like manifesting, like every day I visualized that northern terminus, and I knew what it looked like because I'd been there before and spent time there, just kind of reflecting, thinking about that moment throughout the entire thing. And then to actually get there, it almost didn't feel real.
Mm.
It almost felt like this. It's like, wow, I'd been thinking about this moment for the last like 19 days, and it's finally here and it's finally done. And we joked, like when I got there, we joked, I was like, oh, let's go back, let's do a yo-yo, let's go back, because
Oh.
I didn't want it to be over. As much pain as I was in physically and mentally, especially the last 30 miles on the beach, like were not super enjoyable.
Mhm.
I didn't want the adventure to be over,
Oh.
because it was that the whole thing was such an adventure. And I love that trail, just
Mm.
the Florida Trail, period. I think it's the most underrated long distance hiking trail that we have in the
Oh.
country, and it's so unique,
Mm.
and it's in our backyard.
Yeah. I'll have to tell you, the few areas that I was out there, I'm like, it truly is incredible out here. Like, I remember some of the sections, like, I was out, and yes, of course, it looked like Florida. There was palm trees every once in a while, but it's just like you wouldn't even imagine this being in Florida. And I only saw a very small portion of it. And I know you've scoped a lot of the trail out before you went out, but especially being out there for the actual adventure, like you were there, you know, 19 days and some change, and truly got to experience so much. And I can only imagine it like all coming to an end and then you being like, oh, I'm done. But I'm glad everyone was there to support you. I know I contemplated coming up, and then when I found out Brandy was going, I'm like, there's gonna be so many people, I didn't want to overwhelm you. And it's just an amazing journey for you to completely complete this. And it's just incredible. I can't tell you how many times like I'm so impressed. And I'm sure you learned so much out there. And before we kind of get to that, like you had mentioned that you didn't want it to end. Was there any point within there that you were like, I need this to be done, like where you wanted it to be done sooner than it was because you're just done with it? Or were you out there experiencing or enjoying the experience the whole time?
Both. Like it's funny, the entire time all I could think about was finishing,
Okay.
right? That's it's like, obviously that's the goal, right? It's like the destination is the journey, whatever the quote goes. Um, but every day too, I was living in the moment every single day. Like every day I had different things to look forward to. I had different milestones I could look forward to every day. Like you're with me and I was like, oh my gosh, we're at mile 200. Let's set up a little 200 thing in the sticks, right?
Yes.
And like milestones like that, or like the halfway point, or just for me, it was new sections of trail I hadn't been on before, or sections I had been on before and I knew I loved and I was excited for. So every day I had something to look forward to, and it was just a new adventure every day. And I love that, but on the same token, it was all just so hard. Every day was a struggle. It was a different struggle, and by the end, the eating thing was the hardest thing for me. And
Mm.
I even had sores, not in my mouth, but on my tongue. Like
Mm.
most people know that feeling, like when you eat something too hot and you burn your tongue, and
Yeah.
you have this weird feeling like your tongue just got burnt for like a day, and then it goes away, right? I had that feeling on my tongue for like 2 weeks,
Oh
and
gosh.
it just burned, and and that didn't go away for almost a week after I finished.
Wow.
That was weird. And I think again, it's just I'm eating constantly. But yeah, it's weird. Like every day I thought about, like, getting to the finish. I knew this to be over. This is so hard, until I actually got there. And even though I did want it to be over, I was so ready for I was just so ready to, one, sleep in, not wake up at 3 a.m. and just sit down for a while and not be
Mm.
so rushed, because as you saw at so many of the cruise stops, minus my one big break of the day, I was like, go, go, go. I was like,
Yes.
I'm not wasting time here, because I knew I had the long break eventually. And that was my time where I could like kind of rest and recoup. But I was so focused every single day on just the overall mission that there was no downtime. There was no time to relax at all. And so I was excited to finally finish and relax, even though I did love the trail. I loved the adventure of it. I loved that every day was a new just surprise.
Yeah.
Even if I had seen some of that trail before, there was just always something different, you know. But
For
some days I was definitely like just at my wits' end with all of it. I was like, we're getting there. The countdown is on because the point is to finish, right?
Mhm.
But when you finish, it was like this kind of mixed emotions where I was like, well, it's like I want to. It's weird. And I think about this still too. It's like I want to go back and relive some of the days.
Ooh,
Um, Not relive like the feelings or just like how bad I felt, but really just go back to certain sections of trail that I really loved. It's like I want to go there again. I want to do that day again. You
yeah.
know. So I think, we're kind of getting out of Florida trail season as it gets hot, like the summer months. It's not a good time to get on the trail, just bugs, heat, all of it.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely just planning out just, either this spring or just once we get into the, fall and winter season next year, just a bunch of random self-supported 50-mile days that I just want to relive on the trail
Very cool. And
because I loved it so much.
so with this being said, like obviously you still love running and you still want to do it. I know you were kind of worried about like I don't know what's going to happen after this, but when do you think you'll start running again?
I think because I feel so good as I do, my original plan was I'm gonna take a month off.
Okay.
But honestly, it's been 2 weeks and everything feels fine. Everything feels healthy. I think I'm probably gonna get back into it like next week and just
Pretty
kind
cool.
of, but like super simple, super easy. I'm just gonna go back into it with just, I'm gonna see if I can jog a mile or two,
Mhm.
right? Because another weird thing is I don't know what it's like to run nonstop without taking a walk break
Oh, that's true.
because I trained to do a run walk. And the entire time I was on the Florida Trail, it was a run walk interval, or just a lot of power walking. And so it'll be weird to like try and run without taking a break. I think that'll be challenging, but I'm excited. I feel ready. I think, 2 weeks to just kind of let my body fully rest. I've been getting amazing sleep, I will say.
Good.
Like I actually just looked at I slept 9 hours just last night and I looked at my watch's 7-day average and it was like 8:46 hours every night. For the last 7 days was my average. I was like, that's some pretty good sleep.
Heck yeah.
So yeah, so I'm excited to start running and really kind of starting not from like scratch, but kind of starting, the building blocks again, you
Yeah.
know, learn what it's like to run for 10 miles without stopping.
Yeah, I was say and not I don't mean this in a mean way, but like you have completely shifted from like, you're a very fast runner and then you go to something slower because the purpose of the FK or with this FKT is you're obviously not going to run for 20 some days, so you had to really slow down your pace and also work on run walks, and incorporate that. So now going back into like let me become a runner again. Not saying you're not a runner, but to get back into a normal rhythm where you consistently run and then you get your speed back and your feet under you and you go out there and demolish all the next amazing goals that you have, which
Mhm.
I'm excited to see what you get into. And I know we briefly talked about this while we were on the trail together, but do you have anything planned or do you have any ideas of what you want to do in the future?
I do have a goal race. And so I did not commit myself to anything before doing the Florida Trail because I didn't know how I would feel when I finished. I didn't know if I would finish and be injured. I didn't know if I would not finish and be injured. I didn't know if I would finish and be burnt out. And, kind of like I said earlier. So I didn't commit to anything. But while I was on the trail, I think this was like day 16 or something, I got off the wait list for a race that I had been looking at. And I try to do a Western States qualifier every year. This will be I think my fourth year doing a race, and I got the email, and luckily I was able to like I was on my phone, and I actually saw the email because there were a lot of emails I missed because I'm not
Mm,
looking at my emails, but the notification popped up that I got invited off the wait list, and so I am excited to be running the Laurel Highlands Ultra, which it's in June. So I can't say with confidence that I'll really be ready by then to like really race and compete. I would like to really race and compete, but I have a lot of work to do. I definitely have lost all my speed. But I'm excited. It's a 70-mile race in Pennsylvania that is in the mountains. It's very rocky, I've heard, but it is an old school ultra. It's been around for a really long time.
so
And
cool.
so it has a long-standing history. It's really well supported. It's just I've heard nothing but great reviews, minus the course being really rocky and really hard. But I love a challenge. I've run in Pennsylvania once before. I've done the Heiner 50K, which is an awesome race. Um, so yeah, so that's in mid-June. So I will be participating in the race. I would like to, compete, but we'll see what my fitness level is at by then. So
Yeah, very cool. And at the end of the day, you want to finish, and I know that
yeah.
we talked about this prior, and it doesn't matter if you don't come back fast. I do think you will. I think you'll be surprised, just because like you've literally just built such an amazing endurance foundation for yourself, even though you already had one, and then went out there and accomplished this. I feel like you're going to be like ready to go and tackle the world, which is awesome. And I'm super excited to see what you do in the future. I know you said you want to go to Western states, so that's really, really cool. We did talk about that on the trail together, so that's cool. Now, one thing I've been dying to ask, and I'm sure you learned so much, but like, what is probably the one thing that was your biggest takeaway after doing this whole amazing adventure?
So it's funny. I had a lot of time. I was really alone a lot. I had a lot of time to reflect just on just the whole experience and just day to day. I just had a lot of time just to myself and in my own thoughts. And like I will say, I feel like I definitely learned a lot about just ultras. Just it depends on the type of race, though, right? This is a very long, drawn out like stage race, is the way I've seen it. Um, but the biggest thing I've learned, I think, is that you can't bank miles in the beginning. And I see this a lot. A lot of people in the beginning, they go out really fast trying to bank miles, they're trying to bank time. And guess what? You pay for it in the end. You either blow up or you don't finish. And so for me, the biggest goal was consistency. And I can say now, I am honestly, I executed this exactly how I wanted to. And so second thing is just consistency trumps everything.
Mm, yeah.
If you can train, to be consistency and then intentionally, hold yourself back, right? In the beginning, if you know, like, oh, wow, these are some really, maybe fast miles, or I feel really good. So why not just like run on this high? But you like most times, unless you're a really good athlete, you can't maintain that.
Hmm.
You need to find something that you can maintain and stick to that, right? But again, in these ultras, anything can go wrong. There's so many things that could go wrong. So I think it's important to have a plan A, plan B, and plan C,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No,
I
that's
think we talked about this
yes. Yeah, we
because
did.
you didn't have those when you did your 200 miler, right? Or
No,
did
I
you?
did.
You did. Okay.
I had an A and B, and then at the end of the day, like I had a C really, like to finish. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, you always just want to finish. But I did have time goals. And we did talk about this because,
Mhm.
I had mentioned to you like I'm just so impressed. Like you're consistent, and you're like, yeah, like consistency is what has truly gotten me to like be doing what I'm doing. And mind you, this was earlier in the actual adventure, but you were super consistent, super. I just cannot get over how with it you were, and I'm so happy to hear that you were, were the whole time. And also, like you had mentioned, you had a plan and you knew what you were doing, and even when things kind of went south, you still like uh I've always liked the saying like expect the unexpected. And you really did. Like you things kind of went weird and then you would be like, no, we need to do A, B, and C, and then you just fixed it and would keep going. Or Scott would, hey, we need to do this, this, and this, and then you would do that. So it
Mhm.
was super cool. And within the whole thing, I'm sure, like you mentioned, you learned so much. You were alone for quite a bit. And just seeing you continue every single day to go out and bank all these miles, and not in the sense of like bank the miles for in the future, but like hit all the miles that you needed to, and then
Mhm.
sometimes a little bit more. But you never took it to the point where you were doing way too much early. You were very conservative, very smart, and were consistently moving throughout this entire thing, which is, obviously worked for you tremendously at the end. And what would you say within this? Because I know a lot of things went weird and a lot of things, maybe felt detrimental at the time being, but after now being done and taking a step back, what do you think was like the hardest thing to overcome when you were out there? I know eating food was one of it, but like in the sense of physical, like being out there.
Physical, I mean, there were a couple days so really I was really worried about getting injured. That
Okay.
was my biggest thing. I was just so paranoid. I haven't really had a running injury in like over 3 years, but 3 years ago I've had Achilles problems before, and I had a problem with like an anterior tibialis tendon,
Mm.
which eventually led to like a stress fracture. And so I've had like multiple injuries, but it's been a few years since I've had those. But those things only came up whenever I did like a 100 miler or like a
Mm,
really big mileage race. So I was really scared that just this high volume would something would pop up. Even though I did train myself, like I did slowly just train myself with this super high volume. I think, one of the last months of my training, I posted, I think I did like a 600-mile month or
wow.
something like that. Like a lot of walking, don't get me
Yeah. Oh
wrong.
yeah. Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
of that's like power walking, but still, that's an insane amount of mileage. So there was a day, and I'm really lucky. It was only one day. It was day 7. It happened to be the day I was like kind of getting going through Orlando of all days, when I also had a lot of people out there helping me. I felt a weird pain in my Achilles,
Mm,
and I for sure thought this might be the end of me.
mm.
And I for sure was just like, and also it's funny because that day, it was an interesting day. I started off, the first 7 miles was a road walk, which I will say it was really nice to start off the day on like pavement or sidewalk road, because I could get some like pretty quicker miles in while it's early, but really like walking miles. Because in the morning, I never wanted to run too much. So it was nice to have pavements, because like, oh, I could like walk way faster on pavement than on trail,
Mhm.
in the dark. Um, so that was like okay. But then once I got into Tosahatchee, it it was just really slow going. I had a really slow going day, so I never took a nap either that day. That
Ooh.
was a day that I skipped a nap, and I regretted it because I ended up being so exhausted by the time I got to I think it was like mile 45. It was when I got to Lockwood Boulevard in Oviedo. That from there on, the next 20 miles is on paved bike path, pretty much.
Okay.
And so you have like this 20 miles of like really easy 20 miles, right, through Orlando. It was at the end of the day, and I knew I was only going to do another like 7 or 8 miles after that, but I was so exhausted. My Achilles was hurting me. I for sure thought this might be the end of me. I just had a really bad day and I felt terrible. I had a huge mental breakdown, of course, in front of like 10 people, because we have so many just like runner friends in Orlando. I was just like bawling my eyes out. It was just a pretty low moment for me. But somehow, Scott, like I was just like, I just got to keep moving. I got to just feel this out for the next however many miles till I finish the day. Scott actually used KT tape and kind of taped up my foot and my leg to help kind of support the tendon. And it didn't feel great, but it wasn't like, it was a weird pain and a weird feeling. And
Mm.
eventually the next day, I was fine. It never came up again throughout the whole rest of the Florida Trail. But I will say there were lots of days where I would have just like all these random pains in my Achilles or like the front of my ankles, and I thought like, oh, is this gonna be something serious, or is it just kind of like ignore it and it's fine? And most days it was fine. It
Mhm.
was just kind of just general pain and swelling from being on my feet all day, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was the only, I mean, that was scary.
Oh, I can
Because
imagine.
that was my biggest fear in this whole thing, was just getting injured and not being able to finish. Because for me, I have such a deep connection to the Florida Trail, and just, being from Florida, and I love this trail so much. It means so much to me. I've been dreaming about this for like a year and just talking about it. To me, not being able to finish would have crushed me. You
Mm.
know, like for me, even if I didn't get the FKT, I wanted to finish. Even if it was over, 22, 23, 24 days, I wanted to finish this trail because I love it so much.
Yeah, and that's incredible, and, I will have to admit this, when we were out there, there was multiple times in the morning where you were like, "I'm just gonna walk. I don't wanna get injured." And I think you were, like, trying to convince me, and I'm like, "No, we're good, like, we can walk. There's no reason to run. It's pitch dark." And, a few of the mornings that I was out there with you, like you said, it was really foggy, so we could barely see what was in front of us. But it showed how much you cared, and I kept thinking that, like, she cares so deeply about this, because you kept like telling me, "Hey, like we're just gonna walk for a little bit." I'm like, "No, we're cool. Like we can walk as much as you want, obviously." But like you did um, show like how much you cared, in the sense of like you didn't want to get injured. You were so cautious. I remember a couple sketchy areas. You would come in and say like, "Oh, that was really sketchy. This was going on," and going up and over things. You were very careful. Like you didn't mess around. You know what I mean? Like you're just very due diligent and super just cautious, which is you needed to be. But I can only imagine having a little bit of a pain pop up and be like, "Oh no, this is the end of me," especially being, 40 some miles in at one point and,
Mhm.
being tired and all that. So that's incredible. Also, you had the nutrition issue come up, which is completely understandable, and you overcame it because I watched in multiple videos and, I kind of saw a little bit when I was there of you like just getting food down and choking it down, which is incredible. After you finished and were completely done, did it take a while for you to want to eat anything?
So at first, I didn't have an appetite at
Okay.
all. Like, I didn't really want to eat anything. So I would say it was like 3, 4 days. I didn't have an appetite. I really didn't eat a lot, which is not good. Obviously, after doing something, you need to refuel your body. Your body's trying to like recover. Food is fuel, food is medicine. I really didn't eat a lot in the first few days. But then somewhere, and plus I was just really tired too. I really didn't feel like cooking, and I was just pretty lazy. um, but after a few days, honestly, everything was fine again. I was eating like normal. I was eating some of the snacks that we had packed that I didn't even touch on the trail. I was like, it's so funny looking at this box. I actually brought it with me. One of my big pantry boxes to when we did the Florida Death Race, because I was packing frantic because I'm just gonna take this whole pantry box and I'll go through it when I get there and pick out some of the stuff I'm gonna eat, some of the cooking stuff. And I remember looking in there and be like and being like, oh, this like this was disgusting to me when I was on the trail, and here I am eating and I love it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, thankfully everything went back to normal right after. So that
That's
was good. And
yeah.
the appetite thing only lasted a few days, and then everything kind of went back to normal. My body realized like, okay, we can, we're fixing everything up.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's truly wild to know, like, how extreme your body goes in the sense of, like, you didn't wanna eat anything, everything looked disgusting, and then, maybe a week or so later, you're like, "Huh, this looks really good." And it's something that you didn't want to, try or eat or anything, which is all, crazy. And then also something I don't know when exactly this started, but you and Scott did a grape toss, and you would catch a grape?
Yeah. Yeah, we started the grape toss, I think on like day 11,
Very cool.
like kind of a little over halfway through. I don't know why, because we were doing fruit every day. And this one of the days he was like, hey, like, and he filmed it. He's like, I'm gonna toss you this grape. And I was like, oh, let's see if I can catch it. Like, oh, I was like, yeah, I got it. And then every day after that, we just decided to do a grape toss, and he filmed it. And that was just kind of a fun little thing that we did every
Yeah,
day.
for
And we
sure.
didn't forget it. We just be like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. No, it's so cool. I saw him post it. I'm like, this is so smart because like little things like that really make a difference in the crazy endeavor that you're going in. Was there anything else that you guys did throughout this FKT that was like a little joyful thing that you did that kept you going?
I mean, we were Scott and I, like Scott's one of my best friends. We've been friends for like 2 years now, and we would just constantly play jokes on each other. Like,
Mm.
I'm always giving him crap.
Mhm.
He's giving me crap. And really, like I can't think of anything else specifically, but I'd constantly be giving him crap. Like obviously, I'm out doing the trail and he's crewing me and he's helping me, and I'm being a little needy, right? And sometimes I would be like extra needy on purpose just to mess with him. Like, he'd bring me something, I'd be like, oh, but can you like bring this other one? Or just to like make him do extra work, but then I wouldn't. I'd joke.
Yeah.
But he started blending a lot of my food towards the end, and so a lot like of just like a fully normal meal. Like, example, it started on like day 13. I think he made me like this like vegan mac and cheese with chickpeas in it for protein, and I took 2 bites and I actually threw a little bit of it up because I couldn't chew.
Mm.
This The thought of it was just, it was too thick and mushy. I couldn't really eat it. I was like, Scott, I think you need to blend this for me. And he started putting that in a blender, and sometimes I'd be like, Scott, this needs more water in it. Can
Ugh.
you add more water? I need it more watery so I can drink it better, because if it was too
Mhm.
thick, I couldn't really drink it either, right? And then so some of the days he would just like blend me a soup, put soup in a blender, and I would drink it, and I would like intentionally get like a milk mustache, but like just like a huge soup mustache. And I'd be like, Scott, I'm like, is there anything on my face? And he'd be like, you're fine. But it would always kind of, we just make each other laugh with silly things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
Like
Scott is
songs.
amazing. Yeah,
So
he's amazing. He was such a trooper, and it's funny. It was so funny seeing you two interact too. Because at first I'm like, oh shit, like, oh no, they're joking. No, 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 they're joking. They're cool.
uh,
Because like I didn't know you, I didn't know him very well. And it was it was so cool to see you two interact out there. Definitely tell you guys were like super, super close. And he kept you smiling, laughing the whole time. So that was awesome. And I can only imagine what you guys got into later into the actual adventure, which is so cool. But is there anything that you want to talk about before I let you go about your FKT or anything of that nature?
Um, I want to say, I think, I obsessed over this trail for like almost a year, right? But really, once I was in that 6-month window mark before doing this, all of my time was going into training, studying the trail, planning out, all these crew stops, driving to a lot of these crew stops, and, familiarizing myself with the trail. And I think, this goes with this goes with other races, other long distance hiking trails, or, FKT routes. But for me, knowing the beta of this trail, I think gave me a huge advantage. And then also, talking to Sean Blanton about everything Florida Trail, like he was my mentor going into this. He did the Florida Trail in 2020. He was the first person to establish a fully supported FKT on the Florida Trail, and he is a wealth of knowledge. As you know, he was with us for some of the days, and I would just ask him questions. Just be like, what about this? What about this section? What's this section like? And then I would go drive there and I would see it. And I went to him a lot. And then I also looked at the data. Like I looked at his like I looked at, he sent me all his Koros
Mhm.
data from when he did the Florida Trail, and I looked at his daily mileages. I looked at like his pace, and then I also, from the FKT website, I went and I looked at Hunter, who did the Florida Trail last year, and I looked at all of his daily mileages too, and I obsessively looked at like both of their day by days, like what they did differently, what they did right, what they did wrong. And I really took all of that information to try and set myself up, for success doing the Florida Trail. But really knowing the beta of the trail helped me, because I will say, if you go back and you look at, what Hunter did last year on the Florida Trail, and he'll tell you this too. What did he do on day 2 and day 3? Well, he went really hard and did like 260+ mile days, which he later ended up paying for after, right? Because one thing, if you don't study the Florida Trail or know anything about it, day 2 and day 3, it's all a lot of pavement or gravel road, and
Cool.
it's really runnable. Like I'm talking real runnable. So any person who's, goes into it, doesn't have like a really solid plan, unless you're an elite athlete, like that's not sustainable to go out and do a couple, 60+ mile days, right? And so knowing the trail in those sections and really reeling myself back and trying to be conservative with it, I think helped me,
Mm.
because it set me up, for a little bit more success. And then knowing, just other parts of the trail, like, oh, okay, I know this next section coming up is going to be probably really muddy or slow going. So right now, I'm going to pick it up a little bit for this section, knowing that what I have ahead is going to be harder. And then so many other just random areas, just like little things. I think it just really helps to know the trail and just to study it. And, and for me, what I love about the trail is just being involved in the community too. And so I really wanted to be part of just like, the other thru hikers that were experiencing the trail, and, meeting them and getting to interact with them. That was a fun part of it. But yeah, that, and I will say, I never once thought about quitting.
Awesome.
That was one thing. I had a couple people ask, if I ever thought about quitting, and I never did. Even on like the harder days, it never crossed my mind once, because I love, just my heart was all in on the
Oh,
trail. And I meet a lot of people that I've crewed people for races, that DNF, and I race direct too, so I see a lot of races where people drop out, and just being part of this, kind of community culture. You see a lot of people, and like DNFing is okay,
mhm.
that's totally okay. But a lot of times I see people who don't finish a race, and there's all kinds of reasons why you might not finish. You might not make a cutoff. You might be really sick. You might be injured, right? But a lot of times, people, there might not be anything wrong with you, but your heart's just not in it.
Mm.
And your heart has got to be in it, for whatever race it is. If you're not like fully in it, like emotionally, you're not, you're not attached to it in that way, what's the point?
Mm.
You have to have a why, right?
Oh, for
Like
sure.
that's That's what you have to have. Um, and I can say, throughout the entire like Florida Trail, I never let it break me or break my
Mm,
spirit. I was always like, and you were with me, and like I was honestly always in a pretty good mood.
yeah. The
Like
whole time I
I
was
feel
with
like
you.
I really thought I would be more just like kind of just grumpy. I really wasn't. I felt pretty good. Like 80% of the time, like I was always pretty, chatty and happy to have someone with me whenever I had a pacer.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. I don't know, I'm trying to think of
I
anything else, but
I
yeah.
have to say, so we'll kind of I'll say a whole bunch about everything you just said. So Sean knew that course so well. Like I remember he was trying to help me with something. It was one of the mornings I had to meet up with you and I was supposed to be able to get through this locked gate and I couldn't. So I'm like calling him freaking out and he's like, "No, it's cool. You'll just have to go this place. If you drive here and do this and do that and then you could just run in." And I'm like, "You just know this?" He's like, "Yeah, I do." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And then we were actually it was I think the second day. I was with you in the morning and then he ran with you in the afternoon. And then I went and took a cat nap. Sadly, I hate to tell you that I did take a cat nap. And he met up with me and he was just telling me so much about this random area that we were in. And I was just like in awe by how much knowledge he had, which was awesome. So it was so cool that you had him. And then I do remember when we were out in the course, you were like, so I examined Hunter and Sean's data like so much, and I learned so much just from that. So like with you mentioning like being all in, like you were so in, it wasn't even funny. And it truly showed because the, few times that I was out there with you and then seeing you post stuff and then obviously you completing this and having the fastest time, you knew your shit. Like you genuinely knew so much about this course. You knew what to expect and truly use that in so many ways to either, go a little further when you knew you needed to, or, like you'd mentioned, like holding back a little bit at that day 2 and 3 when a lot of people would have probably ran a lot faster, but you knew this is where a couple people messed up. It's runnable. I have, X amount of mileage to go, which is a whole bunch. And you played it safe and were smart, which just showed like how much research you did, how much like you were truly fully invested in this, not only for the sense of like what an amazing accomplishment, but like you loved it. And it showed you loved it because you were a ball of joy every time I saw you. Like I was seriously like, how is she so happy? Like she is literally out there for days on end. She's hating eating food, which is completely understandable, but you were so happy all the time. Like I think there was only one point that I had when I was with you where you were like, I think I need a little second. I'm going to put some music in and just, walk in front of you or walk behind you, whatever. I'm like, okay. Other than that, the whole time, like you were chatty, we talked, and I like so much respect for you because you could genuinely tell like how much you cared about what you were doing and how much work you put in. And like you had mentioned, having a why is so important and being all in is so important. And like you showed that throughout this whole 19 days and 12 hours and 13 minutes. Like you genuinely, it was all there. You weren't gonna quit. And it's so amazing to know that you had no thought of quitting. You were there and you were gonna do it. And it was just, it's awesome. And I'm so proud of you and I'm so happy to be a part of it. It was such an amazing journey just for the few days I was there. So I can only imagine, not wanting to stop, but also being relieved that you were done at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thanks. And that's what it comes down to, something this big and this crazy. I mean, you got to be obsessed.
Mm.
You really have to be obsessed. And, for me, I love this trail. Like, it's weird. As tough as that was, if I could do it again, I think I would.
That's crazy.
Like, I think I would.
So I have a question because
Yeah,
I have felt this way before, but do you look back now and go, I could have done a little better?
absolutely.
Yes. Oh,
I've
it's
always
the
thought
worst
about that.
feeling, right?
Absolutely. I mean, but it's funny because I don't. I'm really happy with my time. It's like I look back and I think of like what I would have done differently, how I could have done it better, but then I think about how I felt in that moment because I remember very well how I felt in so many of those low moments. I was like, there's no way.
Mm.
I could not, like, I was just dragging some of these moments. Like example, like I said, the first 5 days, I wouldn't change anything about what I did those first 5 days mileage wise. Like those days, I think were executed almost perfectly. But then on day 6 and day 7, both of those days, at the end of the day, I finished on these like long, like road walk section stretches. And so theoretically, like, the nice part about being on like a road walk is you could go as far as you want and you have crew access, right?
Hmm.
Whereas when you're on the trail parts, you only have crew access every so often. There were some days where I could only do 53 miles because the next crew stop was 10 miles away, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, well, I'm either doing 53 or 63, and 63 is too much,
Yeah.
right? And so when you're on these road stretches, it's like, oh, cool, I could keep going because I have this crew access this whole time. I don't have to carry a pack. They can kind of follow me a little bit. And so, on day 6 and 7, both of those days happened to end on these like road stretches where I could have gone a little further. I did, I think, 55, 54 miles on that day 6. And then day 7, it was the day in Orlando, and I only did like 52. And that was one of my lower days, right? Had I gone like five or more miles longer each of those days, it could have put me, it's like, it could have put me a little bit more ahead. But then at the same time, I think of, after those days, days 8 through like 15, 16, every day where I finished was perfect.
That's
Like
all.
some of those days I was able to camp right there. Like the timing was perfect. So, had I gone further on those days, where would we would have finished the other days? You
Yeah.
know, would it have put me in a weird place to where we had nowhere to camp? Right.
Mm. So true.
And there's no way to know, right? It's like I can't go back and change the past, but I do think about, the little things I would have done differently. And it's like, and if I ever had a chance to do it again, like how I would do it differently,
Yeah.
you know?
It's this horrible curse. Like you're so I don't know how to say it, like you're so proud, like, and you
Mhm.
feel like I did it. I've worked so long to get here and I did it. But then you look back and you're like, but I probably could have done this a little differently or this a little, and it's just who we are as people. But it's an amazing, amazing job. And you truly, you and Scott crushed it and everyone that came out there to help you. So it's truly, truly so amazing. And I hope, you can ride the high of having this amazing accomplishment as long as you possibly can. Cause I know, it is hard when you get out of it and you're like, oh, now I'm done and my whole life is
Mhm.
completely over because you're not training for this FKT. But
You're
um,
like it's like this feeling of being lost. And
yeah,
I've Googled it, and a lot of through hikers go through it too. And I think it's harder for hikers because they're out there living in the woods for 3 to 6 months.
mm-hmm,
And your whole identity is like you have a trail name, you're in the woods, you just have a simple life. All you got to do is walk. And then you
mm-hmm.
finish, you go back to like normal life. And it's like kind of weird. It's like, oh, people are calling you by your normal name and you're not on the trail. And it's this weird feeling of lost. But no, I'm really proud of myself in
Yeah.
this whole accomplishment. And I think, just to go back on it a little bit more, I really, this was my first time doing like anything this big, like a
Mhm.
multi-day, borderline multi-week, long ultra. And I really just going into this like played the game smart.
Mhm.
That's all it was. I had a plan. I stuck to it. I'm very thankful nothing really went wrong, like all the little things we dealt with every single day, and, everything, went out really well. And I think I played it smart, and, I played it a little safe too, not knowing what it would be like. I went into this kind of thinking I knew what it'd be like, but I had no idea what it
Yeah.
would be like. Right. And so now knowing what I know now, you know, it's like, who's to say, like, if I had a second chance, could, you know push it a little more, right? The only reason I didn't push so hard, it's like, oh, I could have cut however many hours off of the time, but I'm happy with how everything played out.
That's awesome. And you should
So
be. It was an
yeah.
amazing, amazing,
it went
amazing.
it went better than I thought,
Yeah.
so
Well, that's all that matters. As long as it went better than you expected, that's amazing. So with all of this being said, do you have any desire potentially in the future to go back and try to beat it?
yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, like if I could, I want to, but I will say, like, it's so just demanding, just the
Mm,
train. Like, obviously, I don't have like the planning is like I already know the trail and all the planning. I theoretically could just redo the same itinerary, sort of.
mhm.
Um, right? But just the training is so demanding, and honestly too, like financially, it was a lot.
Oh, I can imagine.
Because Scott's my good friend, but I did pay him to do that. It's like I wouldn't expect anyone to crew me for practically a month for free. Who has a month to take off of work in their life, right?
Mhm.
Um, so just that are kind of reasons like holding me back from probably doing it again. But I'm already devising ways I can just go do like my own self solo, like 200 miler or something on the trail
Oh, there you
just because I
go.
like it. But if I could do it like again, I just love the trail. It was such an adventure. Like I want to bring more people on the Florida Trail. And that was my goal too, was just bring more attention to the Florida Trail, which it definitely did.
100%.
And I want to bring the spotlight to the Florida Trail. It's one of 11 national scenic trails. Not very many people know about it. And, I don't think it'll ever become like a premier FKT route, but I think it's an amazing route to race. Like, again, if you really like study the trail and like learn the beta of the trail and like have experience and know how to do these like really long distance trails, like this is a great route to race. Like it's a solid mix of trail, some road, some pavement, but it's flat and there are so many challenges that come with it both being flat and then just some of the trail. It's harder, it's deceptively hard.
Mhm.
And I just think it's an awesome route to race. So I really hope in doing this, it inspires maybe more people to go after the just doing the FKT supported.
Mm,
I just think it's an awesome route to race.
for sure.
So
And I can tell you so many people when I was out there helping you were like, "So what trail is she on?" Like
yeah.
they had no clue. And it really brought light to me like, "Oh my gosh, people do not know about this trail."
Mhm.
And, I thought I knew a decent amount of this trail. I've lived in Florida for quite some time. I haven't really run, obviously, the Florida Trail as much. I live, Southwest Florida. But I learned so much about that trail just in that little bit I was there. And I didn't even, I did run out there quite a bit, but I wasn't truly on the trail as much as I would have loved to because, you know, that little bit of section that I was in, I was like, this is amazing. Like, it's so beautiful. It's like you said, it's deceptive. You don't realize what is really out there until you're out there. And I know everybody that I talk to, I'm like, you need to go see this trail. Like, it's awesome, and there's so much out there that they can go and see. And hopefully, we get to bring so much attention to this, Florida Trail, and then people do take advantage of the FKT and try to go after it, or just go experience a little portion of the trail.
Mhm. Yeah, and you got to do one of my favorite sections
Oh,
too. Like that 20-mile segment from Starvation Slough to Kissimmee Prairie Preserve State Park is
mhm.
so beautiful.
It was beautiful.
And we're so lucky that Scott was there and Sean was there to help figure out the car situation because it is a really hard, like that whole area is really hard to drive around through. You just have to drive so far to get from point to point.
Mhm.
Um, but we got to see a crested caracara that day,
Yes.
and that's the only time I got to see one of those. That is such a cool bird. If you remember, I was like, so
Yep.
like, oh my God, I gotta get my phone. I was like, I gotta get a picture of this bird. Like, what a cool bird. But yeah, that's one of my favorite areas down there. And so yeah, it's all just so beautiful and just underrated in my opinion. I
Mhm.
think I really want to bring more light to the trail and just get more people to run it because it's just so beautiful.
No, and you definitely have, like, you've brought so much attention to it, and, just that little bit, and I have to go back. When you saw that bird, you lit up so much. Like, you were so happy. I'm like, "Oh, I don't know anything about this bird." So then you started telling me about the bird. I was like, "She is, like, on cloud 9 right now." It was so funny. It was the cutest thing too. It was awesome.
Uh,
Awesome.
I'm not even a big bird person. That's just like a unique bird of like Central Florida.
Yeah, yeah, and it was so cool to experience it. So amazing, again, amazing effort, amazing job. And, I hope you truly get to have so many people learn so much about this trail because I know how much that means to you. So we will do our best to get this out there to the world and all these people to hear about it. And I will have your social in the show notes. That way people can come and creep on you and see all of the amazing photos that were taken by everyone that was out there. So again, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing this little bit. I am so pumped to see what you do in the future.
Thanks, Liz. Well, and thank you for being part of it. I could not have done this alone. Like Scott was my only crew person, and then, you plus I counted 32 other people that were out there.
Incredible. That's
for the
awesome.
19 days that helped, it all made a difference in
Yeah.
me getting to that finish. So,
And it just shows you how amazing this community is. I know we've talked about this before. The ultra community is out of this world, and all these people that come out to help you accomplish this amazing goal. So it's just an incredible thing.
it is. And I've thought about this too, and it's like, you came out there and all these other people showed up to help me because you believed in me,
Heck yeah,
right? It's like you believed in me and you believed that I could finish and you wanted to help me get there. And that's what matters, with this community. It's like it's supporting each other and believing in each other, because there were moments where it's like, I didn't believe in myself and I didn't know, but guess what? Other people did.
for
And
sure.
uplifting each other is what we need, and
Yeah,
being there as support for people, in their, endeavors and dreams and racing. And that's what matters. Community creates unity.
for sure. No, I love that. And I have to tell you this. So many people after I went out there were like, "Oh, so when are you going to do it?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm not going to." And they're like, "You're so excited." I was like, "I'm excited that this female, Deanna, is crushing this FKT. Like, I could not be more pumped." And it's truly like there was no doubt in my mind. I remember so many people were like, "Well, do you think she's gonna?" And I'm like, "Yes, 100%. Like, she's gonna do this." And I was so happy to go out there and help you. I remember like when you initially talked about doing this, I was like, "Oh, I would love to go out there." And then like I got to know you, and I'm like, "I'm 100% going out there." And I knew you had put in so much work beforehand, and it was just incredible. And so like hands down, hats off, you crushed this goal. I was so pumped. I never thought for a second that you wouldn't do it. I was just wondering how fast you would do it, honestly. I'm like, "Ugh, is she gonna go at
Like,
19, under 20? Like, let's go." So pumped for you. I was genuinely so excited. So again, I have to tell you, I creeped on you endlessly to watch the tracker. Like I'd wake up, check, yep, she's moving. So it was so cool to be a part of, and I truly appreciate you letting me come out there and help you in any way possible.
oh my gosh, well, it was so much fun. I loved it when you were there. It was such a good time, all of it.
For
So
sure.
I'm excited, and I definitely want to give back. And so if let's chat after this, because I'd love to help you for
Heck
your
yeah.
some of your upcoming big goals.
For sure. We'll definitely chat after this. So again, thank you so
So
much for being on the podcast.
awesome. Thanks, Liz.
Yep.